Hello and welcome. Ugh, I'm done with cringy standard introductions. Did you know that your womb was my first house?
I did.
You were a terrific landlord.
Thank you.
I think that could have been the point in my life at which I was most relaxed, actually.
Well, that's good to know, actually, that I created that.
Okay, so what is your name?
Joe Thompson.
Wonderful. I think it's fair to say that out of everyone, you've known me the longest.
I think I have.
27 years?
Yes.
What was that like? That must have been difficult.
At times. Challenging.
Awesome. So, yeah, this is my mother, Jo Thompson. Very quickly, because she can be very like me in this regard, I will plug her book, Ted and His Head Full of Worries. Do you want to say what the book's about?
It is about a child's experience with OCD, and it is based on one of your siblings.
Oh, really?
And my own experiences with it, helping.
Yeah, there we go. I'll give you an up close, extreme close up, I think they call it. Ted and His Head Full of Worries by Jo Thompson. Available in fine bookstores everywhere. Now, you are here today because we're going to ask a few questions. I will try my hardest to let you answer most of them.
Okay.
Bar the ones directed at me.
Yep.
As you know, that's probably going to be extremely difficult.
I know.
For me not to hog the limelight.
But I know. That's
Okay.
fine. I'm used to it.
So without further ado, someone asks, how do you balance the young child's need for control with the need to keep them safe and healthy? For example, if they want to eat only one type of food or refuse to do any exercise.
How did I balance it with you, is the question.
What were my eating habits like?
Well, when you were young, you didn't like foods touching on the plate. And I had to learn quite quickly to make sure that the foods didn't touch. So, if there was runny foods, to make sure it was right at the edge of the plate.
Yeah.
You only liked hot foods, and I know now you don't like hot foods. Do you like your food it had to be hot, otherwise you didn't really want to eat it?
Do you remember when I refused to eat it at a friend's house?
Yes, after I told the mother you ate everything, you were a really good eater, and you didn't eat things.
I remember
it wasn't
that.
hot enough.
It was so annoying.
I laughed.
I was
You were annoyed.
furious.
I know, you were furious. I know.
And
she was confused.
do you remember I went years refusing to put milk? Put milk on my cereal.
Yeah, you only ate dry cereal.
Yeah, I did that for years.
Yeah.
I really longed that one
Maybe
out.
that was to do with
Yeah.
the foods touching, different groups touching.
Okay, next question. What is the best piece of advice your mum and you could give to a fellow parent of a PDA 5-year-old with a big journey ahead of them with things like school, getting a diagnosis, etc., and any advice for a parent that is being very controlled by the child? Great idea, by the way.
I think it's difficult to give advice because every child is different. Every parent is different. They've got a long journey ahead of them. I think a PDA child often knows what is best for them. Obviously, for a 5-year-old, it's very difficult for a mother to give that control to a 5-year-old, and I wouldn't suggest they did for a moment. If I'd have known then what I know now, I wouldn't have continued to put you through the different schools that I put you through. But I wouldn't say to anybody, don't put your child in school, because that's not the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's a learning process for all of us. I was a very relaxed parent, and that helped, I think, for you.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to your gut instincts as much as possible and not anyone else who doesn't know what they're talking about.
I agree. When you were a child, when presumably so much less, if anything, was known or understood about PDA, how did your mum cope? Did she come up with her own strategies to support you and your development, or did she struggle on with traditional parenting methods? How did whatever she did work out for you both? And were there particular struggles for her and you as a child in respect of one or two parents?
I think it was a struggle both ways. I tried the traditional parenting because that was what I knew with my own upbringing, but I also used my own strategies and maybe stopped listening, as I said before, to other people and went with what I felt was right for you, which at the time I didn't necessarily know it was right.
So it's a very intuitive approach.
Yes, it was. Yes, definitely. And I had no idea about PDA.
Yeah. So you were almost completely going with your instincts.
Most of the time, yes.
I would actually say that's probably the best approach.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, there were battles with you and I didn't have a clue what was going on, and I did try to listen to other people sometimes and I found that didn't work.
Okay. No questions spring to mind yet, someone says, but I'd be up for hearing many a story about you as a child. Tee-hee, wink.
There's too many to start with. I mean, you know, I realise you were a very anxious child and certain things made you anxious. Now I realise it was your lack of control. At the time I didn't know what it was. It was...
Support network. What support did your mum have while you were growing up? What does she wish she had? What would have really helped?
What would have really helped if I had known about PDA for a start. I suspected you were on the autistic spectrum from the age of 7 or 8, and as we know, you didn't get your diagnosis till 14 because it was very blurred. I wish I had known about PDA, and I wish I had known about groups and support groups, because I've only found that since coming to your talks, and I've been overwhelmed with emotion about having that support now. You're an adult now.
Because these days we have social media.
And yes, we didn't have
online
that then.
And conferences.
Yeah, I had a lot of support from obviously my own mother, but we didn't know.
Other families.
Yeah.
How proud are you, Mum, of the son you have and how he is able to live and contribute to so many people's lives? Did you ever expect this, or did you always know he was going to contribute in such a significant way?
I'm immensely proud, obviously, and I always knew you were going to help other children. From the age of 13, you must have said something along those lines that you wanted to help children who struggled like you did. And now I see you doing it, and I feel that it was always your calling to be a public speaker. You were born to be a public speaker and to help people. You struggled, and your own experiences help you, helping others.
Good answer. What do you both have in common? Where do you clash? What are your proudest moments of each other? Is it possible for sons to be proud of their mothers?
You tell me.
Yeah, I said in my book, you know, how your attitude was ideal.
Yeah.
We can take away the understanding component because that's not your fault.
No.
You know, obviously you said one of your regrets is not understanding or knowing about PDA.
No.
But I said in my book, your attitude was perfect from the very beginning. You set the home to fit us, and not the other way around.
Yeah.
So I suppose that would be something I'm proud of. Where do we clash? She over-enunciates certain consonants. Like when you say, you over-enunciate your T's, like when you go salt. Or when you say sick, like she'll be like, I feel sick. And that can be really frustrating. If I'm being pedantic.
Which you are.
Yeah.
Always.
What else? I had to make a list. Sometimes you might take a while to answer. Like I've got a memory, like when you and Rick, her partner, were picking me up from an autistic social group once, I asked you a question and you stared at me longer than 3 seconds while smiling. Oh God, I still have flashbacks to that moment. Other things where we bond over, music, like singing, harmonies.
Definitely.
Although I can be pedantic about that too.
Yeah,
I can be a perfectionist when it comes to that.
You can be a perfectionist with that, definitely.
Do you want to tell them that story?
What, in the car?
Yeah.
When we
It was years ago now.
Driving back from Kenwood.
Yeah.
In Hampstead with Ella, myself, you, and my brother Nick. Ella is your sister. Mm. And you were determined to get a 3-part harmony. And, well,
wasn't happening.
In no uncertain terms, you shut me right up. So I just remained silent for the rest of the journey.
I gave you many chances.
You gave me probably 2 chances.
Come on, 3, 4.
Anyway, it was funny, and my brother and I were in hysterics for the whole way back, and I was trying desperately hard not to sing.
And I've got a memory as well of, I think we could have been in Spain, and in order to calm us down, that was probably me down.
Yeah.
You took us on like a little journey in our mind, and you invited us to, when I say us and we, I mean myself and my siblings, to create a little garden of our own making. I remember you saying, "Oh, you can always come back to this garden when you feel anxious." Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do actually.
Or when
I had forgotten about that, so thank you for reminding me.
Yeah.
I think to calm you down, I would often say
Pavarotti.
Well, that's a funny story too. The first time I played it.
Yeah, my mum started playing Pavarotti in the morning because I'd be extremely anxious in the morning. And I love Pavarotti, and so do you.
It was
always
my
have
favourite.
done.
It was my favourite.
But it had the opposite effect, because my mum would start playing Pavarotti and my siblings and I would just burst into laughter.
And be in hysterics.
And pretend that the sound of his Italian kind of... would you say he's a baritone or a tenor? He's got a vast range.
I'd say tenor.
Yeah. We would pretend that his voice was actually being produced by our pets. Do you remember that?
I do. So it was quite an exhausting journey often.
Yeah, okay.
But it was full of laughter.
It backfired
so that was good, yeah.
Let's see. Okay, one about mainstream schools. To persevere, to homeschool, or to unschool if the child is struggling?
That's such a difficult... I would never tell someone what to do. It's not my place. But my own experience, and like I said earlier, if I knew now, if I knew then what I know now, for you, I would have taken you out of school earlier and had you homeschooled, not by myself.
Unschooled, I'd say.
Unschooled. It took me till you were 16 and expelled from your last school to realise school was not.
But do you think...
for you, and had never worked for you.
Yeah.
Apart from the social aspect.
Yeah.
You can find that with homeschooling.
But did I really need school?
You didn't need school because you taught yourself. You knew, it sounds ridiculous to say, but you knew more than the teachers in most lessons.
I'd say the same goes for many PDA kids. And many autistic kids, actually. Yeah. Question for Harry. What was then and is now the thing you wish people understood about PDA? Gosh, it would be a shame to isolate one feature, because we're at a stage now when we need maximum understanding and acceptance. So I wouldn't necessarily want to isolate one particular part of PDA. I suppose it always comes to the school aspect, because it's by far the most common question I get asked. What are we going to do about school? To trust in the child's autonomy, to trust that the child can teach themselves, can be autodidactic. Great word, that, isn't it?
I know.
Yeah, great
word.
I love
that word.
Because it's often a huge concern. I've never met a PDA child, and I've met a lot at this point, who struggles to educate themselves in some way. They all seem to be perfectly capable. And there's so much pressure surrounding school, and that is largely due to the legal status surrounding children being in school attendance. So just to trust in the child's autonomy, That's the hardest thing for people to do, but it's also the most important thing. What do you wish could have been done better or different, or not at all, by others to you for your own individual needs, safety, security, mental health as a child growing up? Have we answered that one?
That's directed at you, isn't it?
The thing is, I wouldn't necessarily change anything. I don't know if I would change anything. I mean,
if our experiences make us who we are today.
That's what I mean. And then I wouldn't have a book.
No, I probably feel guilty.
I wouldn't have a purpose in a life right now if everything was plain sailing.
Yeah, perhaps.
You know, so I have to count my blessings and feel immense gratitude for everything I've been through, good and bad. How about this one? How to help with sleep. Getting him off to sleep takes hours.
It does. I went through, I started off listening to the health visitor. That was a nightmare. That caused more distress. So wouldn't advise anyone to listen to any health visitors. And then in the end, I'd lay with you for hours, fell asleep on your bed, didn't put you to bed.
Yeah.
And then I would, once you got to, when you were at school, I'd put you to bed with your light, but always read a story, and then leave you reading your books pretty much until you fell asleep, and then I'd turn the light off when I went to bed.
I'm very big on eliminating bedtimes.
I wasn't strict with it.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, if the child is avoiding sleep because it's a demand, remove bedtime. Provided they're not insomniacs, that's a different story. But if they're not insomniacs, and it's only the demand of sleeping which is proving problematic, remove bedtimes, because their little bodies will naturally fall asleep.
You did have a routine, but I never gave a time of turning your light out. You may have been in bed roughly around a certain time, but I didn't care if you were reading till 2 a.m.
I can remember feeling immense panic around bedtime.
I know. Like
the bed.
Yeah.
Like
yes, I
know.
know.
Being near the bed was scary.
Yeah, so I would always stay with you for a while.
Yeah.
I can remember tucking you in at 13, so yeah.
Okay. How does Harry today compare to Harry as a young boy? What are the constants? What has changed? What do you wish you knew? Is it like a puzzle that has clicked together, or is it totally different?
I think a puzzle's clicked together with my, I've learned more as...
Is there anything I was doing really small that I'm still doing now? Like, not necessarily the bad things, like constants.
Yeah, I think, Harry is still Harry. You haven't changed. Obviously, you've grown, you've become wiser, and obviously you've grown up. But there are still probably if a demand's put on you and the way you may react to it, or your silly noises and things like that, that hasn't changed.
Yeah.
If someone says something you don't like, and you'll shout something out to change the subject or whatever it is,
Very passionate.
Yeah.
Let's have a look. Hi. I would love to know how your mum coped with negative feedback from family.
Well, it's difficult, isn't it? Because even though your family loves you, they don't always understand what's going on. And I didn't understand, to be quite honest. So I was struggling